Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about cybersecurity. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, if you're working with cybersecurity, what are the most effective practices to enhance the resilience of your applications against evolving cyber threats and vulnerabilities? Well, I would say that this is pretty it's usually pretty straightforward. So one of the things that you probably have heard about if you've done any type of development work with security in mind is OWASP, or the organizations that help out with giving us a basic understanding of what the top exploits are. So start by just learning that the top 10 list, which is usually clickjacking, SQL injections, XSS attacks, what have you, cross-site request forgeries, these sorts of things, right? Those are the basics topics that you should look at first and foremost, and then the second part is that you follow pretty much, I would say it's standard practice for a lot of companies at this point, and that is to use multi-factor authentication on everything that you have access to within your system. And apart from that, apart from the obvious things, don't keep, production secrets or passwords or stuff like that in your instant messaging channels or over email or things like that. Use like a secure key vault of some sort, either from your cloud provider or from something like 1Password or similar sorts of things, right? Like it's basic. If you have this mantra with you, if it is dangerous to show something to anyone, like if it's not just public information, put it in something that has a password, like behind something with a password, because the number one way usually now that if you're dealing with, because in essence the current trend at the very least, it's that there's two main things that happen when someone is exploiting your system, one or two usually. Either you're the victim of information, basically that the exploiters have they're extracting information from you in some way. They're in some way acquiring production secrets or something that gives them access to databases or similar sort of things, and you have a leak in essence. The other one is ransomware, and we'll talk about ransomware as well. But to stop the first one from happening, these are the best ways. Like, keep your software up to date, make sure that everything is password protected in some fashion with multi-factor authentication, because once that is in place, it's extraordinarily difficult for an exploiter to get into the system, especially if you're following like OWASP's recommendations and so forth and so forth. And then of course we can come into talk about like how you secure a network and things like that. But these are the main things. And then one thing that is a little bit, honestly, this is the thing that makes it difficult for most people. Uh, there is also a value in making sure that you actually read when you get an email or you get some type of links or something like that, or a file from somewhere. This is the hardest part usually. This is what gets everybody, and that is to make sure that the person who got the email, and it doesn't have to be a software developer, it can be your product owner, it can be anybody, you have to make sure that you're not inviting people in. Because if you're not looking at suspicious emails or things like that, if you have no thoughts on how to deal with that. And most companies usually have like these sorts of test drives where they send out a phishing email or something like that to try to see if they can get you to click on it, just to keep people on their toes a little bit. Because right now, as things are, if you follow the things that I've said, it's extraordinarily hard for a attacker to get you. Because I mean, take if you followed all the practice I just told you about, then when it comes to like, getting direct access to production or a database or something like that, that will be very hard for them. The other thing that they might try is to use like a distributed, like a DDoS attack or something like that, which should also be handled if you're running something like a cloud or similar sort of things like Cloudflare or Akamai or whatever you might have, or something other than that, of course. So most of those sort of like serious exploits that people are using to extract information, yeah, almost all of them come down to that the exploiter somehow got in through either an insecure website of some sort, or that they got someone to click on something, and now they have some type of entry point into their workstation or similar sort of things. And you're very limited in if it limits a lot if you have these basics in place. The thing that also happens is a ransomware attacks, and this is something that where it's extraordinarily important that you as a person, you understand that if you lost all those files, and this is no different from, recommendations that people give to their friends about how to store their, their family photos and things like that, that you always have more than one instance of it. So if you have some type of cloud syncing going on, or if you have some type of basic backups, like for me, for example, I use GitHub or some like version controlled system for basically every file I have, and so I don't have to be the victim of a ransomware attack in order to to use this. It's just a simple thing like, oh, my computer got infected by some off-the-shelf virus somewhere, or it's a little bit sluggish or so forth. I just want to drop everything and then get back to a normal state. It's very cheap for me to do that, because basically just reinstalling my operating system with factory settings and then running running through the some type of automatic installer or similar sort of thing gets me back to basically the state I was in before I was attacked. And then of course we can go and talk about like rotating keys and as I was saying, key vaults for your production systems like SSH or TLS encryptions and things like that. All of that stuff is usually covered by the OWASP top 10 and like the security practices that they preach, because guys, usually a lot of people think that like when it comes to these exploits that you read about, the government being exploited or different companies and so forth, you think that there is that the norm is that these are really tricky exploits that are coming that are being used in order to exploit these sorts of organizations. It's usually not the case. The norm is that you have a lot of people with a lot of stuff going on, and due to conveniences or misconfigurations in accesses and security and things like that, people they basically leave the back door open without really knowing about it, and that's the thing that usually gets people to that's what the hackers will use. In like 9 times out of 10, it's not like a super advanced cyber attack that you're dealing with. 9 times out of 10, it's something that is either down to social engineering, or it's down to that you basically just like you forgot to make sure that something in the code that you wrote. A classic one is that you forget to check when someone does a put update, like an update to a system, that you forget to check that they actually have access to update that information, or when they're getting information that you actually check their identity in the application itself. These sorts of mistakes, these are the common exploits that you usually see. So what I want you to take away from this is that when it comes to securing yourself against cyber vulnerabilities and stuff like that, just learn the basics to start off with, because that's going to get you 80% of the way. Then make sure that you have multi-factor authentication on anything that is in any way not public information. In other words, you use a key vault for your passwords. You don't just have like a login or something like that. You always have like a secondary authentication system, because that means that even if someone gets your passwords or something like that, at the very least they won't just be able to jump in and start taking stuff over. So these are the basics. Everybody should be doing this. And then when it comes to more advanced things such as securing your application and things like that, this is where I usually use a checklist or something like that. If you're doing if you don't have a checklist for basic things that you should check for when you're doing security work, like make sure that your pipeline is running vulnerability scans on your libraries and things like that. Make sure that when you're doing like creating APIs and stuff like that, that you write tests, actual physical, like actual unit tests or integration tests, that actually makes sure that your role-based authentication is working in the way that you expect. And then finally, make sure that anything that is sensitive, or like files that you want to make sure are intact, try to picture this. Let's just say that your hardware failed. It doesn't have to be a ransomware attack or something advanced like that. If it failed, would you be able to be able to get those files from some cloud storage or some other storage provider? If yes, then you're pretty much safe from like a ransomware attack, which is one of the most popular ways today that people get attacked. And then finally, make sure that that you are aware of that if someone sends you an email or something that seems a little bit fishy, make sure that you check the links, make sure that you just don't click and so forth and so forth. And this is the hardest part, guys. This is the thing that makes me sort of say that you will never get to a point where people are safe from security things and so forth. I mean, even myself, if I have a bad day, I have like a little cold or I'm a little bit irritated or stressed or something like that, I will also probably just click on a link or do something similar, silly like download a file and just click it from some website without thinking about it. And that's why you have all these other checks and balances in place, so that when you make that mistake, it's not fatal for your organization. Have a great day.